There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Swazinski moves to amend House File Number 1938. The second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A51.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swazinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. The A51 amendment takes the $75 million that's going to the tribal nation aid and redirects it to the 11 counties that are within the areas or around the areas of the 11 where the tribes reside. It directs the counties to work directly with the communities that are within their boundaries to help develop and push forward the goals that are stated within the bill. That's essentially what the bill does, Madam Speaker. You know, one of the reasons behind this was during the committee hearing, I asked the question to some of the folks that were testifying on behalf of it and asked what is being spent in your particular areas. And because of the general separation between tribal nations and our own, I think putting $75 million in the hands and where and how it's actually distributed and what's getting reported back to make sure that we're not usurping funds that are within those communities and not by going through a traditional, it was brought up that, LGA and county program aid are already flowing into these communities and these areas, that this would be a better way in which to direct those funds to make sure that we're not potentially putting taxpayer dollars at risk for not necessarily being spent within the guidelines of the state legislature. And so that's my amendment, and I'd appreciate a green vote.
Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Representative Swazinski, you just used the words general separation between the state government and tribal governments. The proper word is sovereignty. The reason for this, as you put it, general separation, is because the 11 federally recognized tribes that share geography with our state are sovereign nations. And so that means that there is a direct government-to-government relationship between the state and the 11 federally recognized sovereign tribes. They are not local units of government. They are not counties, they are not cities. They are independent nations, again, on whose land we are standing. Tribal governments deliver services to not just their tribal members, but to people who live in the geographies of their reservations, inside and outside. We have so many there are so many examples of this. Whether, you talk to the leadership, Chairman Fairbanks from White Earth Nation, and he spoke in our committee hearing about the law enforcement and public safety funds that they spend. And it's not just on their tribal members, it's on people who live within the boundaries of the reservations, because as I also had to explain in tax committee, part of the US government's policies of exterminating American Indian people in this country was undermining the land base that they had, the bits of land that are the reservations, which were established under treaties, which the Constitution says is the supreme law of the land. Those little pieces of land that were maintained from the original land base, which is 100% of this country that we're in, 100% of this state that we're in, were chopped up into pieces. And this was part of this project by the US government, and they gave chunks of land inside of the boundaries of the reservation to non-tribal members. And it was very intentionally to undermine the sovereignty, to break up the land base, and to exterminate the original inhabitants of this land. And so that's why today, in places like White Earth, for example, there are only 2, I believe, closed reservations in the country that were not subject to this policy, the Dawes Allotment Act. One of them is Red Lake in northern Minnesota. But White Earth, like most reservations across the country, underwent allotment. which means that within the tribe, within the boundaries of the reservation, which we see on maps, that's not actually all land that's held by tribal members. They sold off chunks of that land, which were promised in treaties, to non-tribal members, intentionally to undermine and exterminate Native people in this country. And so that's why today, in places like White Earth, you have tribal governments that are delivering services not just to their tribal members, but to everybody who's within those boundaries and to people who are outside of those boundaries. And I think it was Leech Lake, wasn't it, Representative Becker-Finn, that when the COVID vaccines first came out, that the Leech Lake got a federal allocation of COVID vaccines when they were very, very scarce. And they didn't just offer those vaccines to their tribal members. They offered them to all of the people in their area and in their community. Tribal governments, increasingly, I know that White Earth and Red Lake are initiative tribes, which means that certain child protection functions, for example, they've taken over from the surrounding counties. So in Beltrami County, which is ground zero for out-of-home placements for Native kids in our state and thus in our country, really, 1% of those kids end up back with their families. 1% of those babies who are taken from their parents, taken from their families, end up back with them. And since Red Lake has taken over those functions, they're having like 30 and 40% of kids reunited with their families, and they're working toward better and better outcomes for those kids. And so the reason for this tribal aid is because these tribal governments across our state are delivering critical services to their own members, to other non-tribal members who are in their area. Tribal members are dual citizens of their tribes and Minnesota. And so this is an acknowledgement of the interconnection of our communities, especially, those communities that live in areas where there are reservations. This is an acknowledgement that these governments have been providing these services, the same services that cities and counties provide to Minnesota residents, with no support whatsoever from the state. And so while they are not analogous to a city or a county, we have to acknowledge what's happening, which is they are serving some of those functions. They are delivering public goods to citizens of Minnesota. And so this is simply an acknowledgement of the reality that tribal governments are serving the people in their areas, they're serving their citizens, and much as we support these functions through local government aid and county program aid, this establishes support for those functions for these tribal governments. Now, I talked a little bit about Beltrami County, for example. There's a real problem with the idea of diverting money that is intended to support a tribal government to a nearby county. And those of you, I know many of you represent tribal communities, and so some of you will be familiar with some of these conflicts that have arisen and some of these issues within reservations where the counties are responsible for delivering services, where those outcomes have been embarrassing and dreadful, especially for Native children. I would ask for a red vote on this. It undermines what we are trying to do here. It reinforces the way that tribal communities have been treated by this state government, and our attempt here is to do something different. And it's in response to information that we got from elected tribal leaders who came to me and said, hey, this is what we're doing within our governments, with our budgets. And so just to go back to what you call the general separation, to sovereignty. And yeah, that means that you don't get to open anybody's books. It means that we're going to support the work that these tribal governments are already doing for their citizens. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Gomez. You know, I think this amendment does do a good job of spreading the dollars, not just to the 6 tribal nations, but to all of them across the state, and supporting the counties that we all represent. And I think responsibility to taxpayer dollars is an important conversation to have. Representative Gomez said it herself, that we don't have a right to. And we don't. But we do have a responsibility to the Minnesota taxpayer to understand where the dollars are going, how they're being spent, which is not laid out in this bill. We have that responsibility to do that. And rather than asking for guardrails, asking for sovereign nations to report to the state of Minnesota on how dollars are being spent, those tools are already being utilized within the counties. If we direct dollars to the counties, they are already reporting back to us how the dollars are being spent. That's our job, to be responsible for the taxpayer dollars in the state of Minnesota, regardless of where the money is being spent or who's spending it. I ask for your support. Vote green.
Any further discussion on the Swedzinski amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Robbins moves to amend House Bill number 1938, the second engrossment as amended. The amendment is coded A28.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. My last amendment of the night. I appreciate you allowing us to have these conversations. So this amendment would lower the charitable gaming tax to a 5% flat rate. And just to be clear of how we're paying for it, it would also, like the previous amendments, be funded out of a future surplus. So I want to go back to when I first was elected. I had no idea that charities paid sales tax to the state. I thought all of the gaming money stayed in our communities. I really did. So that was surprising. And then when I heard about it, started hearing about it from my charities when I was first elected, I started looking into it. And, you know, we did a lot of work on this. I had the head of the charitable gaming come out to my district. We did a big meeting. I've had multiple bills on this for several years and learned a lot in the process. And one of the things that I think most Minnesotans don't know is, A, that charities pay taxes to the state, and that money is split between the general fund and to pay off the stadium, but also the amount of taxes that charities pay. So if the charities' net receipts are under $87,000, they pay 9%. If it's between 87 and 122, they pay 18%. If it's between 122,000 and 157,000, they pay 27%. If charities are taking in net receipts $157,500 or more, they pay 36%. That is money that the charities are not being able to give in our communities, and that's going into the general fund or to the Stadium Reserve Fund. So we've been talking a lot about all the things that this bill is doing to charities. So the first attempt was, in this bill, there's language that will stop charities from using the e-pull tabs anymore. That is going to be a tremendous hit to their revenue. And so in exchange, I think, for doing that, there is a very small tax cut for the charities. And honestly, when I talked to the gentleman from the Osseo Maple Grove Legion about this, I cannot repeat what he said. He was so offended, and he had tears in his eyes, and he was really mad, and he said, this is things I cannot repeat. But, so just so you know where this bill is going, it takes the first tier from a 9% tax on charities to 8.5%. It takes the 18% tax to 17.5%. It takes the 27% tax to 26.5%. And there's just a little more wiggle room at the top level. It takes it from a 36% tax down to 34.75. We are still taxing our charities enormously, and now by the e-pull tab language, we are taking out the rug from under them with their main source of revenue. So charities are getting a double whammy there. But the third thing this bill is doing to the charities is it's giving Minneapolis off the hook of continuing to pay into the Stadium Reserve Fund, but charities have to continue to do that. So, members, this is crazy to me how we are harming our charities in this bill. So, Chair Gomez, she and I have had good talks about this, and in her comments on the bill about the amendment about taking the language out of Minneapolis, she said that, there's a conversation and that we're going to be re-looking at this agreement, and it's an ongoing conversation, she said, and they're going to, quote, take another look. But that is not, in fact, what the bill says. We're not taking another look. In the language of the bill, it says the commissioner shall not retain any tax from Minneapolis for the purposes of this. So it's not part of a conversation. It is not taking another look. It is saying that charities are going to continue to pay into the Stadium Reserve Fund, and the city of Minneapolis is not. The commissioner shall not retain any of their sales tax money for this. So I just want to bring this together for us as a body and see what this bill is doing to charities. So it's a very negligible tax cut, taking away their primary main source of revenue in the e-pull tabs and allowing Minneapolis to stop paying taxes towards the stadium. Members, what my amendment does is going to lower the charitable gaming tax to a flat rate, 5%, and it will only do it gradually because in order to make it work, it's going to be paid for by future surpluses that are dedicated to this. It's a very small win for the charities, but we need to show them some regard. I have charities in my district that are really on the brink of closing. I'm sure many of you do too. VFW and American Legion is struggling. And there are others, the Lions, the sports teams, the Kiwanis, the JCs. I could go on, and I know we've got all the lists, 1,100 charities that do such good work in our communities, and we're just saying let them keep more of their money to keep doing more of that good work. So members, I'm asking for a green vote on this, and I hope that you will take this very small step to support our charities.
Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, Representative Robbins. We have talked about this, and I know that you are very passionate about these issues and about these causes that the proceeds from charitable gaming support in your community and across the state. And as I said, I also appreciate those activities, and there's certainly no attempt in this bill to try to prevent them from doing the good charitable work that they're up to. I don't want to belabor this, but we are not taking away e-pull tabs in this bill. We are not. We are adding 3 touches to what is currently 1 touch for 4 total touches. We are adding 3 seconds to the time it takes to play a game. So we're not trying to pull the rug out from under anyone. We kept the modifications to the games really narrow. We just were trying to align them with, as Representative Nelson talked about, with that original intent of the authorization of e-pull tabs. Excuse me. So there is in the bill, as you mentioned, it was certainly not intended to be any insult to anyone to provide a $15 million biennium cut to the taxes. I know that when you look at the full picture that it's maybe not as significant as they would want, and it's not as significant as the legislation that you and Representative Bonner have offered. I guess I just would say, I know that you are, I'm being honest in that we are continuing these conversations. I think that there's space for, more of a tax cut potentially moving forward, but, certainly going from a graduated rate where, the lowest is 9 and the highest is 36. Well, I mean, we changed it in here, 34.75 under the changes that we proposed here. I think that's a lot, and so we kind of need to have a little bit more deliberation about this. But again, I appreciate your work on this issue, and this is all on the table as we go into conference. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further discussion to the Robbins amendment. Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chair Gomez. I do, appreciate that you're willing to continue the conversation. And I just, urge the members to think about how this really affects your local community and vote green. Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the Robbins amendment, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, please say no. No. The motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Olson B. moves to amend House File Number 1938, the second and gross one as amended. The amendment is coded A50.
The member from Martin, Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. This is a good government amendment here that strikes a very nice balance between efficiency with taxpayer dollars and transparency and some accountability. So this is regarding local government aid. In order to unlock those funds, cities have to perform audits in order to access those funds on a yearly basis. Now, what this amendment will do is it will require small cities, population 2,500 or less, to have to perform that audit every other year. And why that matters, members, is because as a general rule, small cities receive less in local government aid. Our largest, being the city of Minneapolis, receives a large amount of local government aid, but you can make an argument that they pay in with a lot because they generate a lot of income. So I'm not gonna attack the big guys on that one, but the little guys here in small cities, we get a lot less in local government aid. One city I was talking with, it used to be in my district, now it's in Representative Torkelson's district, and they told me they receive about $30,000 a year in local government aid, which is very helpful. $30,000 is helpful, and they were appreciative of it. But in order to unlock those funds, they had to perform an audit with an accounting firm every single year. And on average, an accountant auditing your books costs about $12,000. So members, we as the state of Minnesota were handing to this small city $30,000. They were taking 42% of that money, handing it to an accounting firm, saying thank you for 58%, my math is poor, I'm a history teacher, remember. 58% they got to keep in order to benefit their community. And so what this amendment would do is it would just say, hey, instead of doing it every year, we want you to do it every 2 years. That'll save you some money. The efficiency with our taxpayer dollars are there. The responsibility and the audits are still there as well. Just some quick numbers. There's 620 cities under 2,500. 312 of them reported audit costs to the Office of the State Auditor, and they said they spent about $3.9 million in audits last year. So those are just some quick numbers. It's a really good government amendment. I communicated with the auditor this morning. She's interested in continuing the conversation, and I'm hoping that the chair is interested in those communications as well, continuing this conversation on.
Discussion on the Olson amendment. Representative Gomez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Representative Olson. I appreciate you talking to me about this amendment a few times over the last day and reaching out to the state auditor. I did the same, and yeah, she seems, it's sort of like there's a couple of questions I think that we have to answer about this because there are requirements in statute around accessing LGA and the reporting that the Office of the State Auditor has to do to the legislature. But they didn't seem, when she kind of outlined them, I don't think they seemed insurmountable. And as you know, like I saw this amendment and I was like, oh, that kind of looks like a good amendment. So that's why I came and talked to you. So yeah, I think that we kind of align in thinking like the example that you used, which you told me yesterday of this town of 95 people where they're spending a third of their LGA on an audit is sort of absurd. So I'm hopeful and committed to continuing to work on this with you and the state auditor, and hopefully we can all kind of sit down and hammer something out because I think this is a good effort. So thank you, Madam Speaker and Representative Olson.
Representative Olson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Chair Gomez. I very much appreciate it. This is a good government amendment that I look forward to working with you for future tax policy bills maybe next year. With that, Madam Speaker, I will withdraw this amendment.
Representative Olson withdraws his amendment. There appear to be no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File Number 1938, as amended.
Third reading as amended. But we do have lots of third reading speeches. The member from Traverse, Representative Backer.
That's because we like to talk. But members, one of the challenges being a member that his district borders 2 states, when we have a $17.5 billion surplus, $9.5 billion increase in taxes, we are already seeing seniors moving across the border into South Dakota, Roberts County, into North Dakota. We see business owners, job creators, instead of hiring people, they pay taxes. Instead of fixing a roof, they pay taxes. Instead of providing other benefits for their staff people, they pay taxes. It is so frustrating. I've been hearing it. When you go from Canada down to Iowa, there is no longer a larger community on the Minnesota side. And this is one of the reasons. So I will be voting no, because I want to do what I can to save the small communities, which are made up of people, stay in Minnesota. Thank you, members.
The member from Rice, Representative Daniels.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. Again, it's been a long week and it's getting late, so I know everybody's tired, so I'll keep this relatively short. I have a small town in my district called Morristown. It's under 1,000 residents. These folks have been through a lot in the last 4 years. Tornadoes ripped their town apart, and I was so encouraged. I saw neighbors helping neighbors, friends helping friends, and basically in 3 days, they lost about 7 or 8 houses that are totaled out in the tornado, but they had everything cleaned up and ready to go, and really worked together. So I'm really inspired by this community. But their fire chief association estimates that because of the ETABs, they'll lose between $50,000 and $60,000 annually from that revenue. So I want to just point out what that means to a little town of Morristown, which is under 1,000 people. Currently, for their fire department, they have a 10-year replacement plan for radios, turnout gear, firefighter masks, and this will cost the fire department roughly around $50,000. Morristown also needs a new pumper truck. In 1994, they bought their first truck back for $180,000 in 1994. In 2008, they bought another one. That was $327,000. The current estimate on a new one is $630,000. So a $50,000 to $60,000 hit to Morristown's budget will make it substantially harder for the fire department to purchase and maintain life-saving equipment, and also hurt the Morristown charities and schools. Morristown isn't the only department that will be hurt by this change. Roughly a quarter of the Minnesota fire departments are involved in charitable gambling. Minnesota already ranks 45th out of 50 states in firefighting funding. We shouldn't be cutting off this funding source when the fire departments are already struggling. This change will be huge for them. They only have $100,000 a year budget. So basically we're going to be cutting that in half. And they actually donate to the local schools, well, school, and they help out the Legion. This community is so tight that just, I go down there about once a month just to have lunch and meet with the people down there. So, Madam Speaker, this bill will really affect small towns like Morristown. And I just plead with the leadership that we can maybe change this, change in the ETABs. And with that, I'm going to say goodnight.
The member from Ramsey, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Folks, I just want to thank our chairs, Chair Gomez and Chair Lislegard, for working with me and Vice Chair Norris to really shepherd our state for the next generation, right? I'm so proud of all the investments that we are making in this bill. And to be honest, this is a massive tax cut for folks in my district and across Minnesota, right? As Vice Chair of Property Taxes, I just want to make it very clear, all of us heard at the doors that all of our neighbors, have seen the increase in property taxes. And for my district, that means, all of the seniors who are on fixed incomes, as well as all of the new families who've moved into the district, because District 67A is probably the most affordable district in St. Paul. So I just want to thank Chair Lislegard for making sure that we help people stay in their homes, because we know that that's what allows seniors to have better health outcomes, and also making sure that new families who want to raise their children in the cities as well as in the suburbs and also in greater Minnesota are able to live the American dream and have that white picket fence. And so I urge a green vote, because it is a massive tax cut for the people of Minnesota. Thank you.
The member from Chisago, Representative Neu Brindley. The member from Stearns, Representative O'Driscoll. The member from Dakota, Representative Whitty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've heard the statement, One Minnesota. This plan does not reflect the middle-class families have been asking for, with tax relief as they face increased cost of living. I also heard that same message at the door. We had $17.5 billion in surplus, and families were looking for some of that money back. Unfortunately, we are raising taxes by $9.5 billion. We are, this is what a tax increase will look for families in Lakeville. Family of 6 making $155,000, 4 children. A 1% metro sales tax increase of $476, 75-cent delivery fee, $150 in tax increase. Total, not counting tab fee increases or payroll tab tax increases, $626 per year. On the other hand, the tax relief in this bill is so targeted, this family may receive some one-time property tax relief if the circumstances perfectly align. Otherwise, they will get nothing. A family of 4 making $100,000, single parent with 3 dependents, 1% metro sales tax, $336 in tax increase, 75-cent delivery fee, $150 in tax increase. Total, not counting tab fee increases or payroll tax increase is $486 per year. I have other stories, but the one I'm going to share is I went to one of our assisted living and talking with our seniors. They were looking for a promise that we all made about the tax on our Social Security, but they also talked about living on a fixed income and the high price of medical, inflation on groceries, and then a 10% on their housing. There was a family, husband and wife, that had to leave that assisted living, which they called their home, for 5 years. middle-class families in Lakeville, and this is nothing going to provide any tax relief. The effects families are already facing with strapped budgets from inflation. Thank you.
The member from Morrison, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members, for this debate and conversation today over the tax policy of our state. For me, as I campaigned throughout my district in central Minnesota, I campaigned upon making Minnesota more affordable, and I hope that you did too, because those are the issues around affordability that citizens across the state are facing in a most dire way right now, thanks to the inflation, because of too much government spending, because of spending beyond our means, because of spending at the federal level that now we're seeing at the state level. Minnesotans and members of this body, increasing spending in our state by 40% is unsustainable. And it puts us on a dangerous path. Maybe that's why we have this bill before us. Maybe during the last 2 weeks we can understand why Democrats have sought to raise taxes by $9.5 billion. Those are tremendously impacting the citizens across this state. Every citizen. In fact, the citizens who want to access our state parks. The people of this state will be hurt by a tax policy that works against their family budget. And I'm disappointed with what we find within this bill today. Broken promises, promises to fully repeal the tax on Social Security, a tax policy which hurts our local charities. It's probably been the number one thing that I've heard from my constituents over the last 2 weeks as soon as this bill was introduced. The concern, the pain from local bar and restaurant owners who know that they'll have a worse off position in the coming years. Members, why are we pursuing a policy and a tax policy in this state that makes Minnesota less affordable, that makes Minnesota more expensive, that impacts middle and lower income Minnesotans the most? Why have we made spending decisions to provide free school lunches and breakfasts for wealthy Minnesotans over lower income and middle class Minnesotans, and the chance to lower their tax rate? We heard an amendment tonight to eliminate or significantly reduce the lowest income tax bracket. But we rejected that tonight. When I say we, the DFL majority rejected that tonight. Because your priority is making life more expensive for the people of Minnesota. That should have been the campaign ad when running for statewide office or local office. I am running to make your life more expensive. That's the policy you will pass tonight. And it doesn't have to be this way. But when Minnesotans truly find out what your spending priorities are, the contrast will not be any more stark. Things like a $500 million expansion of the state office building, a building for politicians. Priorities like increasing pay for politicians in this state. Priorities and policies like failing to fund our nursing homes, but also spending money on a brand new policy position of this state where we are handing money to sovereign nations, something that has never happened before, where we are handing a blank check to sovereign nations. What's the next proposal? A blank check to Saudi Arabia? Members, I raise this with a very specific point. We represent the citizens of Minnesota, the citizens, the taxpayers of Minnesota. And when I traveled my district, the priorities were lowering the cost of living for the people within my district. And when we hand money to sovereign nations, it literally results in higher taxes for my constituents. That's what happens, members. And I'm frustrated by it. And I encourage us. I participated this year in the ongoing conversation surrounding our relationship with the sovereign nations here in Minnesota. And I encourage you to have that same conversation of respect and dignity with the people who live within my district too. That's what I'm asking for from you. But members, tonight, this bill is a part of the agenda that raises the cost of living and the taxes for Minnesotans to the tune of $9.5 billion. A policy that we should not be chasing because of middle-class families who are dealing with inflation because of what? Too much government spending. This budget that the majority party of this body is passing and finishing tonight is a 40% increase in state spending. Where on this earth have we ever seen anything like that before? Where is the Minnesota common sense? Where is the consideration for middle-class family budgets? Please, over the next few weeks, as we land the plane of this legislative session, please, I plead with you to have consideration for the middle-class family seeking to live here in this state. When you are chasing an agenda that will make it too expensive for them to live here, please vote no on this bill and reconsider the extreme agenda that you are chasing in this state.
Representative Neu Brindley. Oh. Sorry, you were just there. I thought you were.
Thank you, Speaker and members. I haven't said anything on this tax bill today. I didn't speak to the amendments. Frankly, it kind of wasn't worth it because we know that this stuff is all happening regardless. $10 billion in additional taxes when we have a almost $20 billion budget surplus. It's wild. And I would just remind folks that it wasn't that long ago, it was just a few years ago, that this chamber was considering additional taxes on tobacco. And it was Governor Walz who told us that tax policy affects behavior. That his belief was that fewer people would purchase tobacco products when we taxed it more. And again, that was not conservatives, that was not Republicans, that wasn't me saying that. That was Governor Walz who said that. And it was not very many years ago. So the reality is tax policy affects behavior. And I was having a conversation with one of our colleagues just a few weeks ago in the retiring room, and I was asked the question, because I actually have a real problem with a lot of the things that we've been doing. You know, for example, I've got a family member who does really well. Physician, his wife has diabetes. Well, they can afford to pay for their insulin products, so why shouldn't they? It doesn't make sense. So we were talking about these kinds of things, and I was asked, well then, but you think that we should eliminate Social Security taxes for everyone. Why do you think that? Well, it's really easy because taxes affect behavior. And I agree, there are people who can afford to pay taxes on Social Security income. There are people who can afford to be part of a new fifth-tier income tax bracket. There are corporations that can afford to increase their taxes. But here's the problem. None of those people have to. All of those people can make different decisions. I was talking to one of my former mayors maybe a month ago, a Democrat, by the way, and he was talking about an issue in his city, and he said that a lot of people were asking him to come back and run for mayor again. But he said, Ann, I'm kind of embarrassed. I'm not a resident of Minnesota anymore. And then he said, are you guys going to get rid of the tax on Social Security income? That was his question to me. Now, this is a guy who could afford to just pay the tax on Social Security income. In fact, he has 2 homes. He still has a home in Minnesota. But he was spending more than 6 months in Arizona now because he does not have to choose to pay that tax here. He can make other choices. We're often told, well, we don't really know if there's an outward migration of wealth out of the state. Democrats, let me tell you, we can name names. We can literally tell you who the wealthiest Minnesotans are who are leaving the state. It's not a secret. It's not a surprise. We don't even have to look to the Department of Revenue numbers. We can just name names. We can literally tell you who they are. And the same thing is going to happen to our businesses. Businesses do not have to choose to invest here. In fact, over the last decade, 2 decades, we have seen Minnesota businesses, homegrown Minnesota businesses, who have stopped investing in the state of Minnesota. And they have made that decision because of things like this, because of this tax bill, because of policies like this that invite our businesses to leave. They don't have to provide jobs here. They don't have to provide jobs with good pay and good benefits. And most of our big companies, they already offer things like paid family leave. We're going to drive those jobs out of the state. But there's no thought because all we see are dollar signs. All the Democrats see are dollar signs. We can find money here. We can find money in the couch cushions there. Well, guess what, folks? I mean, you guys might not hear it in your communities, but I guarantee that every single Republican in this chamber has multiple conversations every single week about the people they know who are leaving. They are not staying in Minnesota. It is not worth it to live under the oppressive tax environment that you are creating. And again, the people who are leaving are the people who could afford to pay it, but they don't have to. And to create a situation where Minnesota is such an outlier with this foreign tax issue, guys, there is not a single state in the entire country that does that. So they're not going to. They're going to leave. I represent a border community, and prior to me being elected in 2016, in the previous 5 years, 18 businesses had actually picked up stakes and moved their business across the river to Osceola and St. Croix Falls. 18 businesses in my county, and those are just the businesses who actually pulled up stakes and left. That doesn't include all of the businesses that were new and just made a choice to locate on the other side of the river. They don't have to come, and they certainly don't have to stay. I was talking to one of the CEOs recently of one of our bigger companies, and they told us, here's the deal, Ann, in this new environment of remote work, they can move their entire C-suite to Nebraska overnight. It's nothing. It is nothing for them to move their headquarters and to move their businesses. And eventually that's going to mean they're also going to move the jobs. This tax bill today is taking jobs out of the state of Minnesota, and it is taking wealth out of the state of Minnesota. And it is going to have the opposite effect of what you are trying to do. You are trying to create more revenue to the state. Again, $10 billion more revenue when we already have an $18 billion surplus. It's mind-blowing. But in your attempts, you are going to drive wealth, and you're going to drive people, and you're going to drive jobs out of our state. This is a sad day for Minnesota. This is an easy no vote on this bill, members.
The member from Todd, Representative Wiener.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My area, Todd County and Morrison, two of the poorest counties in the state. Poorest counties. So here we are talking about taxes. And I think back, I think pretty highly of my dad. He's a pretty smart guy. And I know these aren't his quotes, but I heard them many times. There's two guarantees in life, death and taxes. And here we are, raising 9.5, 10 billion. You know, what's 500 million? It's nothing in this house. More taxes. Economic disparities, we talk about it all the time. We are the poorest area in the state, and we've been consistently for years. And yet government needs more. How do I go back to my area and say, folks, you know, because we have these conversations, you're standing around the front of a pickup truck, you're talking to your neighbors, your family, your friends, and you say, guess what? You only make, on average, $29,000. Metro down there per capita, way more than us. I understand cost of living is different. I understand that. But when I look at my neighbor who's barely scraping by, and I have to tell him, guess what? Government doesn't have enough of your money. Government needs more of your money. How do I explain that to them? What are we going to cut? What can we cut up there? You've taken everything already from us. But you need more. At what point is it enough? So then I think of another quote Dad used to say. What the Lord giveth, government takes away. I wish he was here now. Because I know he would point out this little hypocrisy, which I kind of remember. This was very early on in the session, and Chair Gomez was giving Daniels a little bit of grief, which was kind of comical, kind of funny sometimes. They talked about hypocrisy. So if you look at the Social Security tax, Social Security was never meant to be taxed. This was a fund for people in their golden years to have something set aside. It was never meant to be taxed. It was not a revenue stream for government. But guess what happened? When that pot grew so big, politicians' eyes kind of sparkled. There's a pot of money there, and we'll be danged if we're not going to spend it. And they spent it. To the point where in about 1983, I think it was, hard times in the country, and government said, we have this pot of money, we haven't taxed it yet, we should tax it. You know who pushed that agenda? President Ronald Reagan. So right now we have Democrats saying that we're taxing and we're going to uphold a Reagan tax. My dad would laugh. What is going on in this world when the Democrats are supporting a Republican idea? Absolutely astounding. When I have those conversations at the pickup truck, when we're standing by the tailgate and I talk to our charitable places, our Lions, our VFW, our Legion, and every penny they got and all the volunteer work they put into these things comes right down here. 36% tax on the highest level. We're taxing charitable groups more than we're going to tax weed in this state. Think about that. A $19 billion surplus. And you're going to tell my people in the poorest area of the state that it's not enough and we need to raise more taxes. I invite all of you to come up to my area. We can have those discussions. You can lean against my pickup and talk to my neighbors and tell them how they need to pay more when they're barely getting by now. Vote no.
The member from Dakota, Representative Kosnick.
Friends, fellow Minnesotans, we're familiar with the theme of One Minnesota. It's been mentioned a couple times tonight. And we hear it from time to time and see it on some of the government's web pages. And the administration has even named their budget proposal One Minnesota Budget. And it's a good aspiration to focus on areas that we can have strong agreement on. However, the budget and tax bill proposed by the majority is not One Minnesota. Rather, it's a socialist plan paid for by some and benefiting others. This is a some Minnesota budget. As Democrats raise taxes $9.5 billion and increase fees to be nearly $10 billion in total, some will pay more. Others will offer less. We don't have a revenue problem here in Minnesota. In fact, when I first started paying more attention to politics in around 2009, we had a state budget of around $35 billion, and there was a big debate and a government shutdown about that budget. But now it has grown revenues. The state of Minnesota has grown revenues, have increased to astounding $72 billion in this proposal of the budgets that we've had over the last week. That represents a 40% increase in state government from the last biennium. Democrats seem to have an insatiable appetite for spending. We absolutely have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. The historic surplus that we have been entrusted to is proof that we don't have a revenue problem. We are not underinvested. Minnesota's overtaxed. It's shameful that the majority has failed to deliver on the promise to fully eliminate the tax on Social Security income for our seniors. It's shameful that Democrats are also not meaningfully returning the surplus to the families that created it. It's shameful that Democrats are instead proposing to increase taxes $9.5 billion to feed their spending habit. It's shameful that this bill attacks our local charities all across Minnesota. Friends, we are a state in danger of upending the good life that across America saw the good life in Minnesota on that Time magazine cover. We are in danger of forever upending that culture that so many of us work for and hope for. Instead of One Minnesota that was sold to us, it's become a some Minnesota for the benefit of others. Some are being asked to work harder so others can work less. Some are being made to pay higher and more income taxes so others can pay less and receive a skimpy $275 rebate. Some will have their Second Amendment rights infringed so others can feel safe. A Minnesota where other voters are more important and desired, while some are being disenfranchised. Some of you will pay more, some of us will pay more to drive with higher tab fees, higher sales taxes, so others can ride for free. As long and tough as the days are that we've spent together, we owe it to ourselves and to our kids to keep the faith, to keep working for the promise of the American dream. This budget of identity politics and class welfare fails Minnesota. We can do better than what this tax bill offers for all Minnesota taxpayers and all Minnesota families. Please vote no.
The member from Anoka, Representative Scott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Minnesota Center for Fiscal Excellence, which has been around since the 1920s, said on Morning Take this Sunday that although we've always had a progressive tax system, our state has never been more reliant on individual income tax and high earners than we are now. This volatile system leaves us open and susceptible to extreme budget waves. Well, what are they basing that statement on? Did you know that 53% of the Minnesota General Fund budget is currently collected from income tax, according to MMB? So over half of our budget, our general fund budget, is collected through the income tax. But let's dive a little deeper. The top 10% of households pay 58% of the individual income tax and have 42% of the income. The top 5% of households, that's about 139,000 households, with incomes over 235,000, pay over 42% of individual income and have 32% of the income. 25% of adults in Minnesota pay zero income tax. Well, let's go to why this matters to our general fund budget, given the trend of net migration out of the state. You should have just received this document here. It's from the Census Bureau. And for those of you that are in Ways and Means, you've seen it, but because Representative Garofalo had this the other day. But Minnesota has the unfortunate ranking of moving into the top 10 states with the most net out-migration. So if one $1 million taxpayer, married filing jointly, were to leave this state, what would it take to replace the income tax that they pay? Did a little math. According to the Department of Revenue, 130 new families making $50,000 would need to move to Minnesota. 130 families to replace the $1 millionaire. If you up that income to $75,000 for a family of 4, 32 new families would need to move into our state. This $1 millionaire pays for 48 families with 35% of the income refundable tax credit. That tax credit of $1,726. So that $1 millionaire pays the tax credit for 48 families. Now, if you see on this sheet that I passed out, just last year, in 1 year, we lost 19,400 people net. As Representative New said earlier, people that make a lot of money don't have to pay a lot of money in taxes because they move. Now here's some IRS data. A net of 5,838 people with AGI of $1,000 to $10,000 annually who moved to Minnesota brought in a net gain AGI to our state of $11.9 million. Meanwhile, the 18,466 Minnesotans with net incomes upwards of $200,000 who left over this period from 2011 to 2019 took with them $3.8 billion of AGI. Folks, this is unsustainable. And that's with the fourth tier income tax. We're adding one today. Well, we're not, you guys are. A total of $5.5 billion of AGI left this state, driven by the loss of higher earning Minnesotans. So in a time when we have a $17.5 billion surplus, we're creating a fifth tier. We're spending and raising $9.5 billion in taxes. It's never enough money. We will continue, I can guarantee it, we will continue to see net migration in large numbers out of this state. Members, this is an irresponsible tax budget. It's an irresponsible overall budget because sooner or later we're going to run out of other people's money. Vote no.
The member from Anoka, Representative Norris.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, this is a tax bill that is focused on putting money back into the pockets of working Minnesota families and seniors. It addresses many of the issues that I've heard about from my district and that I've been leading on as the vice chair of the tax committee. It addresses the Social Security tax issue and makes it so that a vast majority of Minnesota seniors will not pay a single cent in tax on their Social Security benefits. It addresses property taxes. It's something I've been hearing a lot from my district as property values rise. So I was able to get the supercharged targeted property tax refund included in this bill. So that if you've seen a big year-to-year spike in your property taxes, you're going to get money back in this tax bill. And the homestead market value exclusion. I've heard from a lot of families in my district who, as their property values have risen, they no longer qualify for that homestead market value exclusion. Well, we adjusted it for the first time in a decade. I've also talked about the manufactured housing that I have in my district, and we've seen a disturbing trend across the country of large out-of-state corporations coming in and buying up parks to turn a profit at the expense of the residents. Well, we negotiated with stakeholders on both sides and came to a great agreement that is going to incentivize owners of those parks when they're looking to sell to resident cooperatives so that those parks can go to the residents and make sure that they remain a great source of naturally occurring affordable housing in our state. And we've heard about the K-shaped recovery that people are experiencing, our students are experiencing coming out of the pandemic. Our more affluent students are able to get things like tutoring and after-school enrichment, and they've largely caught up from the learning loss during the pandemic, while our lower income students don't have the same access to those services, and they're falling further behind. So for the first time in 26 years, this bill adjusts the income limit for the K-12 education tax credit that those students and their families can use to get access to things like tutoring and summer STEM camps. I want to thank Chair Gomez. I want to thank Chair Liz Lagarde for their tremendous leadership. I want to thank my fellow Vice Chair Liz Lee for her camaraderie. I want to thank our tremendous staff on the tax committee. This is a good tax bill, members. It is going to help working class Minnesotans, working class seniors vote green.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Robbins.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members, for a great debate tonight. I want to start out by thanking Chair Gomez for what really is the best committee in the House. We have a lot of fun. And to our tremendous staff, House Fiscal, House Research, Kelly Cavanati, and Sean Haydorn. I hope I'm saying that right, Sean. We have an incredible team that helps us do really complicated work, and we're very grateful to all of you. So, members, this is not the tax bill we were hoping for, and it certainly isn't what Minnesotans were hoping for either. The state has a $17.5 billion surplus, and Minnesotans wanted to get that money back. Instead, there's $2.2 billion in tax increases just in this bill, but in the budget bills we've been working on, there is a 40% increase in the state budget, 40% increase over 2 years, members. It's completely unsustainable. And $9.5 billion in new taxes and fee increases. Minnesotans don't want that. They wanted tax relief, and they wanted some of the surplus back, and they want to be able to afford their groceries and gas, all the things that we all campaigned on last fall. So instead of one Minnesota, this is one expensive Minnesota. And it is not sustainable. A 40% increase in state government is not sustainable, members. You are setting our state up to fail because we will not be able to continue spending at this rate because, as the chair stated, only $5 billion of that surplus is ongoing money. We cannot be making ongoing commitments when the money is not there, and it is going to put us in a terrible hole, and it's really going to hurt our competitiveness. So this bill has two major tax increases, a new fifth tier of income tax, and also, we didn't really get into it, but there's a new tax structure for companies called worldwide income reporting that changes how corporations report their income, and instead of taxing just what's done in the water's edge of their income here in the United States and apportioning part of that to Minnesota, they're looking at their income globally and trying to apportion that to Minnesota. And Representative New referred to this earlier and said we would be the only state in the country to do this, which is true. But members, we would be the only jurisdiction in the entire world to do this. Not only would we not be competitive in the United States, it will hurt our global competitiveness. So the fifth tier income tax and this new worldwide reporting requirement is going to tremendously harm our ability to compete. We were already an outlier. We already had the fifth worst business tax climate in the country, fourth highest income tax. Now we will have I believe the third highest income tax and one of the highest capital gains rates, one of the highest corporate rates. And members, those things also affect families. Like a lot of small businesses pay their taxes through their personal income tax in the pass-through. This is not just about harming businesses. This is hurting the mom and pop businesses, the farmers, the people that make our state and our communities work. So this bill, in addition to the very problematic tax increases, also has a lot of other problems. It doesn't eliminate the tax on Social Security, which I know it makes some incremental steps, but a lot of us on both sides of the aisle campaigned on eliminating this. Minnesota, again, not competitive. Only 11 states still tax Social Security. Minnesota will remain one of those. And there were bills on the other side of the aisle that were offered to fully eliminate taxes on Social Security. 16 of my colleagues on your side of the aisle co-authored that bill. Members, we are not living up to that, what we had all worked so hard on. It also hurts our local charities, as we've talked about. It fails to include the public safety aid the governor requested that would have really made a difference in recruiting and retaining law enforcement. And as we talked about, it picks winners and losers. It fails to give a broad base of round taxes, and it gives credits to very specific things, which are worthy causes, but it will be really challenging for a family to access that when families across the board will be facing the 1% metro sales tax increase, the 75-cent fee increase, the 30% increase on license tabs, and all the other things and all these other bills. So members, I just want to leave you with the sense that, as Representative Scott shared so well with all the data she gave, raising taxes is not growing the economy. It might marginally increase revenue, but what really will enable us to fund the things this state legitimately needs to fund is when we grow GDP, we grow the economy, and we do that by being competitive, by attracting new investment and new talent to our state. And as GDP grows, revenues grow, and then we can fund our needs. But just to keep raising taxes on the same pot of money is not going to help, and we are going to run out of it, other people's money, as Representative Scott said, and we will have a tremendous deficit if we create these ongoing programs. So members, I urge you to reconsider in conference committee a lot of these provisions, and I urge a no vote tonight.
The member from Olmsted, Representative Quam.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. And we've heard a lot about different programs and the importance of helping the homeless, helping the working poor. I've been homeless. I was part of the working poor, working 3 part-time jobs, many weekends working 40 hours a weekend to get the hours in. So when my constituents talk to me about their difficulties, I can understand some of that. And frankly, we've tried to put some ideas to better address those issues. When we talk charities, I used to coach youth sports, and we had kids. They couldn't afford cleats and other stuff, and coaches would get together and we'd get them cleats. A lot of these charities that we aren't, we're helping all these through these other ways. These charities, it's not numbers, it's faces, it's the kids, it's the people, it's the community. These charities that some of them are paying 36% on their fundraising into taxes, they're the ones that know exactly what works in their community, because kids that get involved in youth sports build skills, coping skills, community involvement and connection, which makes a big difference. The programs that these charities contribute to are the ones that are working and helping the kids, that the people in these charities know the faces and the names and the families. There's a big difference. And so we should not continue to suck money out of the people that know what those communities need. We should have taken the amendments to cap it at a low rate, because those dollars aren't wasted. The time put in is volunteer time, and there isn't a lot of overhead. And a lot of the NGOs do good things, but I see a lot of overhead. And frankly, we had amendments that would help those people. I've seen about 3 dozen on that one sheet that I recognize from my area. And I know a lot of you have seen them. Please, go through this list and talk to the people and find out exactly what they're doing in the communities, because they're not in front of TV screens going, oh, look at us, we're doing wonderful things. No, they're working in the community to help. We've had a lot of discussion about, well, we're going to tax the rich. If you haven't seen, we're not England, we're not an island. And that's why when you look at the other list, at all of our neighboring states, they aren't losing population like we are. Losing workers, losing businesses increases the percentage of people that are using the tax programs and the support programs. If we are not competitive and reasonable and the people leave, we're not going to have the revenue to do what we're doing now, let alone the expansion. It's numbers, it's logic, and it's facts on the sheets you've been given. Property taxes. Minnesota just seems to love a complex system that confuses people. And, oh, it's gone up a lot, but we're going to give you some money back. Some, not all of it's gone up. And we're going to have all this extra overhead we're going to spend to do it. If you've been in committee with me, I come up and suggest how to do it better, creative ways that we don't consume a lot of money in making things better, fix the problem. Wouldn't it be nice to not spend tens of millions of dollars in a rebate program, to have a system that actually didn't have the problem of the taxes going up better than 10% or 6%, whatever you pick? And yeah, it sounds great. We'll discuss that going forward. We're interested. Well, then here are bills in committee. I'm not married to the exact word of any bill, any amendment, but the idea is to have the conversation. So together, looking at the different perspectives, we can do something better. Because no matter who you are, you don't have all the right answers and you don't have an understanding of what could go wrong. That's why we're here together, to fix it and talk. And it'd really be helped if actually some of our bills had a discussion in the committees before we bring them up in an amendment and you say, well, we didn't hear that. And we can't do that on the floor. The people deserve us to come together and work. And the people deserve not to have 18 or 17.5, whatever number of billions of dollars evaporate so that we have to raise $9.5 billion more to do what we're supposed to do. Together, we can solve this. I just wish you would have taken our hand and worked on this together.
The member from St. Louis, Representative Listagard.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and members. I want to begin by saying what an honor it was to chair the property taxes. I never would have thought a guy grew up in Embarrass and lives in Aurora, a small little community, would be standing here before you after this last session. And Speaker Hortman, I want to thank you for believing in me and giving me this opportunity. And seeing that a guy from Aurora and an individual from South Minneapolis, two totally different perspectives. The rumor has it that me and Aisha, when Speaker Hortman called us each, we both had the same response, that we didn't know how it was going to work. But the truth is, it did. I am proud of this bill. I was told a long time ago, District first, State of Minnesota second, and Party third. If you look at this bill, it touches everyone. It really benefits the people in this state. It benefits our seniors. It benefits the most vulnerable. From tax relief, local government aid. Representative Scraba, when they were saying about local government aid in small communities, I was just thinking of you. Over 50% of their city budget comes from local government aid. 68% of all money generated in the state of Minnesota comes from the 7-county metro. We talk about not wanting giving money to St. Paul or Minneapolis. Are you kidding me? If you're from greater Minnesota, you need to understand where the money comes from. It's generated here, and 60% of local government aid goes to greater Minnesota? And we're telling Minneapolis, we're telling the 7-county metro that they shouldn't have their money? This is a wonderful, pragmatic bill, and we should be proud. Worldwide reporting, I heard. Don't forget that President Trump in 2017, with a Republican Congress, closed that loophole. And we tried for multiple years, and we couldn't get it done because the Republicans in the Senate wouldn't allow it. Our moment was now, and we seized it. And I'm proud that we seized it. I'm not for raising taxes. That's not who I am by nature. But by God, we're not going to lose that moment because that's wrong. I got no companies where I'm from that is a multinational company offshoring their taxes, so we have to pay more here? We need to do what's right for this state. And that's what this bill does. Chair Gomez, you are truly an incredible individual. Your heart is to improve people's lives. And not one person in here, you might not agree with her politics, but by God, don't challenge where her heart is. And that is to help people. She won me over. It took a month and a half, but she won me over. She won me over because it was real. It was in her to help people. I want to thank the staff. It's unbelievable. We come and go, but that staff, they are the engine of this institution. To my CLA faith, this is the longest I sat in this chair this whole session. And she's sitting right there. She helped me be successful. She's talented, she cares, and she did her job. Thank you, Faith. To Patrick, you, my friend, he brought Aisha and I together. Our offices were next to each other, and by God, I watched him go back and forth for that first month to be able to bring us together, to show Aisha who I was, to show me who she was, and that we may be different, but we're trying to do the right thing. Nonpartisan staff, wow. I'm going to read them off. Jared Swanson, Sean Williams, Chris Clayman, Alex Hagler, Justin Cope, Catherine Schill, Cynthia Templand, Evan Powell, and Maureen Sandy. Totally incredible what they do. They answer every question, and we're all in the committees with them. We are blessed to have the nonpartisan staff do what they do, because without them, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. Thanks again, Madam Speaker, for believing in me, giving me the opportunity, and I stand behind this bill proudly, and I ask you to vote green.
The member from Lyon, Representative Swedzinski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. You know, I think we just need to remember one thing. Despite a record $17.5 billion surplus, Democrats are raising $2.2 billion in taxes in this bill and raising the cost of government and the size of government by over $10 billion through other fees and other taxes and other revenue raisers across this bill. You know, it's been said on this floor, the reason why we're doing this is for the kids. And, you know, I have 5 children. How many else have 5 children in this room? We got a few. And there was a comedian a number of years back, Jim Gaffigan. How many of you know who Jim Gaffigan is? He lives in New York. And Jim also has 5 kids. And Jim was asked, I think it was by his barber or a waitress at the restaurant, and they said, Jim, you know, what's it like to have 5 kids? And there's a few in this room that understand that. And Jim's answer was, imagine you're drowning and someone hands you a baby. Well, that's what Minnesotans are doing today with a 5th-tier tax. What's it like having 5th-tier tax? Imagine taxpayers are drowning and someone adds another tier to our tax code. Folks, Jim Gaffigan is funny. I'd recommend you take some time and YouTube him tonight because we might finish up a bit early or go to sleep, one of the two. But what's not funny is what's going to potentially happen to Minnesota businesses after this budget. The global tax. The global tax. My goodness. You want to put a chilling effect on investment in the state of Minnesota? You add that to family leave and all the other taxes and the regulations, the environmental regulations that are be coming at them, folks. Times are changing. You know, if you're a surfer, you're looking at that big wave and you're just trying to catch that thing just right so you can kind of glide out front and surf it and be out in front of it. Surfing's a lot easier when the waves are coming in. But Minnesotans have a tsunami of government coming at them right now. And those are no fun. That is no fun to surf. Because the rocks are coming, folks. Representative Davids really talks, you know, if he was here tonight, he's spent having some quality time with family, and we commend him for that. But he usually comes up with some song and lyrics and a lot of funny jokes. And you know, the only thing I could think of is the hits, the classic hits. And the only ones I can think of tonight are the hits that businesses and families and communities are going to take because of this tax bill. It's not a song, but there's a lot of repetition. You know, we just need to have people pay more. We had folks come before committee and said that 85% of the taxes are paid by the top 30%, but it's not enough. It's not enough. Folks, when businesses, it costs more to do business in the state of Minnesota, they don't eat that tax. They pass it on to their customers. Those customers are single moms, small business owners. Up and down the tax code, they pay more. Increasing the cost of doing business in the state of Minnesota when we have a tsunami, an economic tsunami that's coming our way. Go into your communities and understand what it is to buy a house today. The underwater folks their homes are going to be underwater soon, their vehicles, their cars, the high interest rates. The DFL does understand that there's trouble coming. That's why there's such an intensity to hand money out to folks. Because deep down they understand that folks are in trouble. Families are hurting. But you don't do it by growing government. We need to take a minimalist look at what the role of government in people's lives. The amount of federal growth in government is unsustainable. That tsunami that's coming towards Minnesota, this wall of cash that the DFL is so intent on making sure that we spend every single dime, not by giving relief to folks that sign the front of the checks, but guaranteeing we give relief to folks that sign the back of them. If we're trying to increase investment in our state, we need to fundamentally relook at the involvement that the state government has in individual lives. The family needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, where folks are relying on family, not some slick politician in St. Paul. Folks, I did the math. There's a list of 19 states whose total budget is less the amount of new spending that this DFL majority is proposing before us. This tax bill is the keystone to ensuring of a government first, big government first policy here in the state of Minnesota. Not families, not businesses, not from the ground up, but from a St. Paul knows best perspective. 19 states. We hear a lot about sustainability. We dealt with that bill earlier today, or earlier this week, in the environment and the energy bill. Sustainability, green jobs. Folks, what's going on at the federal government is not a sustainable thing. What's going on here in St. Paul, and the amount of money that's going to be taken out of people's pockets who invest and push and work to make it work for their family and all their employees. And the state of Minnesota is getting between every single one of those relationships, making sure that it inserts itself into every crevice of our economy, ensuring to say, hey, you, employee, you, boss, the relationship you've developed over decades, not good enough. We know best. Social Security tax. It's estimated that 340,000 folks will not have tax relief in Social Security because of this tax. 340,000. They'll still be paying Social Security taxes. It's like, well, we know how to spend that money. Do 201 legislators understand how to spend that money? Do 201 legislators know how to invest and pour into their children's lives, and their businesses' lives, in their communities' lives better? Or do those 350,000 know how to do it? You know, we often think about diversity in thought and the role that diversity in thought brings to us. Diversity in thought means empowering individuals, not empowering politicians. Families and individuals will make their best choice. Whether it's pulling the e-tab, e-machine of their choice, or we telling them what's best for them to play, or what benefits it is to offer their employees, whether it's one, and if some of these bills move forward, it may just be none. Folks, there are two paths to take. A path that can be well-worn and trusted, or one that forges a new path with an uncertain future. Folks, I know it's asking a lot from especially those across the aisle. Take a step back. We'll take you out for dinner if no one will invite you to dinner after, but you can vote no. Vote red.
The member from Hennepin, Representative Gomez.
Thank you so much, Madam Speaker. I'm really glad I didn't have to go after Chair Lagarde because he made me cry, obviously. That's been a theme of our relationship over the last few months. Big surprise. Two members most likely to shed a tear in caucus, I think we might qualify as. So yeah, I mean, I want to echo what he said. He said it very nicely when the speaker put us together that we said, we don't know how this is going to go down. But I think we have changed each other. We've changed each other's perspective. We have found, I had this realization, I was like, there's probably like more people who like to drink hams, wear Carhartts, and weld things in our 2 districts than anywhere else in the state of Minnesota. But that's not the only thing that holds us together. It's that Chair Lislegard has so much heart for his community. He has such deep care for the people he is here to work for. And he takes that responsibility very seriously. And he tries to pretend he's like some dumb country boy, but I will tell you, it is not true. I don't mean to be telling your secrets, Chair Lislegard. He's just some dumb country boy. Continue to underestimate him, please, at your own peril. Vice Chair Norris, who's been with us every step of the way, thank you so much. You chaired our hardest and worst committees where I was presenting bills. I'm sorry for that. You did an amazing job. Thank you so much. Vice Chair Lee, who's also been on this journey with us. And Dave and I have been here for a couple years, but I just want to say that, Vice Chairs Lee and Norris, you guys have just stepped up so incredibly, and thank you so much for all of the ways that you've shown up for us and for our caucus and our committee, and for me personally. Thank you so much. Representative Davids isn't here. I was really hoping that Representative Swedzinski was going to give me a song in his stead. I've been promised a song on passage of the concurrence, but we're taking suggestions, I think, still. Representative Davids, has been so helpful to me, so respectful, so, I'm surprised. I served on taxes with Davids for a lot of years, and so I think I've seen his best and worst moments, but he has been just absolutely lovely to me. He's been an incredible resource of information. He has gently helped me, like, hey, Madam Chair, you might want to move the bill, things like this when I mess up the mechanics of chairing. And I'm just so deeply grateful for him and his leadership and all of his support. And to the members of the tax committee on both sides of the aisle, I think that the conversation that we had today, which was respectful and substantive and not necessarily just staying within the narrow bounds of the tax committee or the tax bill, is representative or sort of reflects the conversation that we've been able to have in committee. And, I felt a lot of good vibes on the floor tonight. I hope you felt them too. We feel them all the time in tax committee. And so I thank you for keeping that going, and just really, really appreciate all of your contributions and all of your support and the respectful way that we've been able to engage with each other on the issues that are the most important, I think, to people in our communities. We have this big bill. This does not happen just because me and Dave get together in a room, I will tell you. Our incredible, talented, brilliant staff, all of whom I realize after I'm learning about these interesting corporate tax issues, I'm like, you guys could all go make $1 million, and instead you're here serving the people of Minnesota. So thank you so much to our revisers, Maureen, Sandy, and Evan Powell, and our amazing House research team, Sean Williams and Chris Clayman and Alex Hagler and Justin Cope and Jared Swanson, and our fiscal staff, Kathy Schill and Cynthia Templin. Thank you so much. You are all exemplary public servants. And Dave talked about how we come and go and they're here. And they care as deeply about the people of Minnesota as we do, and have made the choice to devote their limited time and energy that they have to us, and we are so grateful to them. To our Humphrey Fellow, Carly Ekstrom, who's been amazing and helped us do all kinds of research. Our partisan researchers, Sean Haydorn and Kelly Cavanati, thank you so much. All of our members, we rely on you for so very many things. Thank you for fielding our strange ideas and helping to shepherd our strange questions and all of that work. We really greatly appreciate you. Lauren Sabis, hi, and Faith. Dave and I, in addition to being two of our most emotional members of our caucus, are also, I described us as having special needs. And so they gave us these amazing staff members who have helped to point us to where the power button is on our computers and many other helpful things. And we're just so thankful to you. Thank you so much. And Patrick. Thank you, Patrick. When Patrick was assigned to taxes, he is HHS master, which people don't maybe realize is actually more complicated than taxes, and has become an expert on all kinds of different obscure and arcane tax policy areas, and has supported Dave and I in just 1,000 ways. And I don't know how to express my gratitude to you. Thank you so much. We have great pages in our committee, Nash and Joe and Nayuma. Thank you so much. Thank you. I have all these awesome statistics that you guys don't want to hear about wealth and income inequality in our country and in our state. And we could go on and we could talk about our, top 5 worst in the nation, racial wealth gap, and we could talk about the realities of this economy for people, but we all know it. Representative Wiener talked about it, about the people in his district. And what is a fact that we all know over however long our lives have been is that we've seen in our economy greater and greater concentration of wealth and income and the ingredients for a good life in ever fewer people's hands. And it's wrong. And whatever our ideology or belief system, we all know that that's wrong. We know that it's wrong when the biggest multinational corporations in the world skirt tax laws by stashing their profits in overseas tax havens. We know it's wrong. And some of these things are policy choices. And many of those policy choices start in places like this, in tax codes. And so that has been my approach and my attempt, and what I have tried to learn about in my time here at the Capitol, is how is it that these words in these pages reinforce and create these patterns of inequity that play out in human beings' lives, in our families' lives. Because all of us in here, we didn't run for office for the glory or the money. We're here because we care about people, and we have strong alignment, and I feel like we've kind of gotten on those to those places today, and we have throughout the committee. That we care about families in Minnesota, and we want them to be able to make a way for themselves, regardless of their background, where they're from, their zip code, their race or ethnicity, their language that they speak. We want all families in Minnesota to be successful. That we care about our elders, and that we value our elders, and that we want them to live dignified and meaningful lives. That we care about children living in poverty. We all care about children living in poverty, and we know that if we don't address these issues, that we pay for them, and our systems are burdened by them, and the human cost of allowing 20% of certain races of children in Minnesota to live in poverty is a policy choice, and it's wrong, and we can do something about it. And so I know that nothing that's been said tonight is probably going to convince any of you to vote for this bill, but I want to remind you as we close out what you're voting against. If you vote red, you are voting against the biggest tax cut in Minnesota history if you hit that red button. You're voting against sending a rebate check to 2.5 million Minnesotans. If you hit that red button, you're voting against sending that check to 2.5 million people. If you hit the red button, you're voting against property tax refunds, most of which are going to seniors and people with disabilities. You're voting against keeping our promises and deepening our partnerships with sovereign nations. And you're voting against cutting child poverty by almost a quarter. So if you want to vote red, if you want to vote against all those things, if you want to vote against the biggest tax cut in Minnesota history and against cutting child poverty by 25%, do as you will. But I'm going green. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The member from Stearns, the Minority Leader, Representative Demuth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, I know in this chamber, our side has talked about ending the tax on Social Security since we came into session in January. And I want to take this opportunity to just let you hear that message one more time. And so I've got a couple of quotes. My number one priority for our senior citizens is to eliminate the state's income tax on your Social Security benefits. This year, I am co-authoring House File 300 during this session to end state taxation of Social Security benefits in Minnesota. Taxing these benefits are a bad Reagan-era policy meant to give the wealthy favorable treatment over hardworking Minnesotans. Another quote, the number one issue I hear about from seniors is eliminating that tax on Social Security benefits. The tax bill would have done this, but some legislators chose to walk away. Matt will finish the job when he's elected and finally provide tax relief to our seniors. Another quote, it's time to eliminate the tax on Social Security. And the last quote, one such idea that I hear about frequently is the tax on Social Security benefits. Minnesota is only one of a dozen states that have any tax on Social Security benefits. It is time for this tax to go away in its entirety. I have long supported complete repeal, and I am co-authoring a bill to do just that this year. Well, members, those quotes were not from Republicans. Those quotes were from Representatives List-Lagarde, Brand, Norris, Wolgamont, and Stevenson. So members, this bill raises taxes. Even when we have a $17.5 billion surplus. This bill will raise taxes by $9.5 billion. Minnesotans are rightfully furious at the tax increases that are in this bill. And I can guarantee that not one person in this chamber campaigned on raising taxes by $9.5 billion, and we also did not campaign on keeping the $17.5 billion instead of returning it to Minnesotans like we should have. This bill fails to deliver on the promises that were made. Members, vote red.
The member from Hennepin, the Majority Leader, Representative Long.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just want to start out by thanking the Minnesota House's favorite sappy odd couple, Chairs Gomez and Listagard for pouring your, Frank, I'm trying to talk to the chair. For pouring your heart and soul into making this the best tax bill in Minnesota history. This tax bill we are about to vote for is grounded in the values of Minnesotans. Minnesotans value safe communities. Minnesotans value their public schools. Minnesotans value affordable health care and housing. Taxes are how society pays for the things that people value and need to live their lives. And here in Minnesota, we are fortunate to have a progressive tax system. Today, we are voting to make Minnesota's tax system even fairer by establishing the millionaire tax that will only impact 0.8% of taxpayers statewide. As Chair Gomez pointed out, during the pandemic, the poorest Minnesotans saw their income shrink by 9%, while the wealthiest saw their incomes double. These are people who have done extremely well and who can afford to do a little more to help our state meet real needs. We'll also vote today to make sure that more multinational corporations who use offshore tax havens are contributing to the success of our state. When multinational corporations use these tax havens to dodge paying their fair share, it's the rest of us that are forced to pick up the tab, as Representative Listagard eloquently said. It's estimated that corporations shifted nearly $1 trillion in profits earned outside of their home countries to tax havens in 2019. We heard a lot today about the tax increases in the bill, but there was no amendment to remove the millionaire tax. There was no amendment to remove closing tax haven loopholes. I assume that's because they're popular and because they're good tax policy. Our tax bill goes all in for our seniors who are on fixed incomes. We have significant property tax cuts, we have significant renters credits, and we fully eliminate the tax on Social Security benefits for all seniors but the highest 20% of income. We heard the old saw that folks are leaving Minnesota because of taxes. Well, if you look at the data, it's not seniors who are leaving, it's not the wealthy who are leaving, it's young people. It's 20 to 29-year-olds. You know what 20-somethings want? They want good parks, good schools, good jobs. That's what our budgets will create. We heard a lot about the revenue we are raising in different areas of the budget. The truth is we have one-time surplus money, but not one-time problems. Minnesotans rely on our schools, our roads, our child care system, but we've underfunded them for decades. We don't need to wait until a school district goes bankrupt, until another bridge collapses, or until child care centers close. We are stepping up to address the real needs of our state and set us up for economic growth and success. But with all this focus on the revenue we're raising, we seem to have left out the really important tax cuts that are in this bill. If you're a middle-income Minnesotan, you'll get a rebate check. If you are all but the highest income 20% of seniors, you'll see a tax cut. If you are a city or county, you'll see tax relief for property taxpayers. If you're a renter, you'll see a tax cut. If you have student loans, you'll see a tax cut. If you are a lower middle income family with children, you'll see a tax cut. In fact, this bill cuts childhood poverty by nearly 1/4. Let me say that again, 25% decrease in child poverty. That is a huge stride in making Minnesota the best state for children and families. Members, we are seconds away from having the opportunity to vote on the largest tax cut in the history of our state. So if you like a fair tax system, if you like closing tax loopholes, and if you like tax cuts, members, vote green today.
The clerk will take the roll on the bill. Members, please take your conversations off of the House floor. Will the chief clerk call the name of the member who's voting remotely?
Richardson.
There you go.
Richardson votes yes.
Richardson votes aye.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 69 ayes and 57 nays, the bill is passed as amended and its title agreed to.